How in Hell's Kitchen can I create a brand new way for Daredevil to see with his superpower? For this drawing, I'm not only creating a new illustration of Daredevil, the man without fear, but we're also diving into the evolution of his signature radar sense. From its earliest comic appearances to its latest artistic takes, we're exploring how Matt Murdock's radar sense has been portrayed in the pages of Marvel Comics. I'm Will Sliney, and over the last 15 years I've drawn hundreds of comics for Marvel, and this is Marvel Illustrated. Stick around to the end of our video to see just how this piece of art comes together. Before we start creating our new radar sense, we have to go back to the past and see how Daredevil has been drawn throughout the decades. To do that, I'm going to lay out a drawing that will take us across the eras, where we'll see different versions of Daredevil's costumes and see just how different artists have drawn his radar sense, a power that has constantly evolved across time. Let's start off by going back to 1964 to meet a character created by Stan Lee and Bill Everett. Our hero's name is Matt Murdock. Let's learn about Daredevil's origin while I lay out our page. As a young boy in Hell's Kitchen, Matt saved a blind man from being struck by a truck full of radioactive chemicals which spilled into Matt's eyes. The exposure permanently blinded him but also caused a mutagenic change in his physiology. In the aftermath of the accident, Matt discovered that while his sight was gone, his remaining four senses of hearing, smell, taste and touch had been amplified to superhuman levels. That's exactly what we're here to draw, his radar sense. This new power allowed him to perceive his surroundings with greater precision than sighted people. The sensory enhancement was initially overwhelming. He could hear heartbeats from a distance, track people by scent, and read print by feeling the ink on the page. But he lacked the ability to filter this consistent influx of information. To master his new abilities, Matt was trained by the mysterious blind martial arts master Stick, who taught him to control his heightened senses. This harsh tutelage, combined with the later trauma of his father's murder, forged the skills and resolve Matt would use to fight crime as the vigilante Daredevil. Daredevil's creation over 60 years ago was a groundbreaking move for representing differently abled people. Marvel defied the trope of the physically perfect superhero by introducing a blind protagonist who went toe-to-toe with formidable villains without magically regaining his sight. By refusing to erase his visual impairment, the character proved that it's not a weakness, establishing Matt Murdock as a powerful symbol of resilience. So I've broken my page down into 5 different panels. Through them, we'll draw Daredevil in his yellow suit from his first ever appearance, the street-level man without fear outfit, also known as the iconic black suit, the black armor suit, which added some functional protection and extreme edges that were all the rage in the 90s books, his secret outsuit, worn when Matt's identity was publicly revealed for a time, and lastly, the classic red suit, the one outfit that no matter what, Matt Murdock keeps on coming back to. The outfit you can find him wearing in the new Daredevil comic series by Stephanie Phillips and Lee Garbett. Then across all these panels, we're going to see just how Daredevil sees his villains as I draw each one in a different iteration of his powers. In the early days, driven by the death of his boxer father, Battling Jack Murdock, who was killed at the behest of a corrupt fight promoter Roscoe the Fixer Sweeney for not taking a dive, Daredevil fashioned his first yellow and red costume from what remained of the robe his father wore in the ring to exact justice. There's something so charming about this era. He's not quite the grim protector yet, he's a bit more of a swashbuckler. Drawing the yellow suit always reminds me that Matt Murdock started out with a lot of heart. The first costume, fashioned from the robe his boxer father wore in the ring, is a perfect symbol of his core motivation. Pure, unpolished heroism driven by love and loss before the shadows truly closed in. Daredevil is an acrobatic and dynamic hero. Believe it or not, to understand how to create a dynamic pose, you can practice with a very simple drawing of a beanbag. Drawing one just like this, where there's no movement at all, is pretty boring. We might as well be drawing a bag floating in space with no weight in it. But we can bend, twist, fold, and turn the shape pretty easily. By adding these movements, we're bringing the simple shaped beanbag to life. The curve that we apply through the main body of our shape is then called the line of action. When we're drawing acrobatic superheroic movements, we want that line of action to really twist and turn throughout the center of the figure. So for this drawing of our yellow suit Daredevil, I'm having him balancing on one hand as he kicks out against a villain. Our line of action will go through the torso here and swoop right up to his torso at the point of impact. As a reader of the book, when we're doing a drawing like this, we'll make their eye follow the line of action in that very direction, which helps bring it to life with that feeling of movement. Here I'm outlining my villain. We'll reveal who it is soon, picking out the key elements, not just the full figure, but drawing in a few more areas like parts of the face, fingers, clothing, parts that are popped significantly further forward from the parts of the figure behind them. And lastly, I'll draw on these radar-esque rings, which will all emanate out from one point. Once this is drawn, I can digitally invert the line art so my black becomes white and the white becomes black, giving that stark, dark, powerful feel to the image. Let's pull back the curtain so we can see who Matt is actually sensing. Zebediah Kilgrave, the Purple Man. The Purple Man has to be one of Marvel Universe's most original and disturbing villains. Originally introduced by Stan Lee and artist Joe Orlando in 1965's Daredevil issue 4, the Purple Man got his name after Kilgrave was exposed to experimental chemicals that literally turned his skin purple. But with that came the terrifying ability to command anyone within earshot of his voice. Kilgrave's crimes range from extortion to murder to psychological torment, but his most infamous obsession is with Daredevil. Time and time again, Kilgrave targets Matt Murdock not just to defeat him, but to break him, manipulating friends, partners, and innocent civilians as weapons. In 1993's The Man Without Fear series, we get a retelling of Daredevil's origins. Expanding on his early days, we see Matt take to the streets, not in his signature red devil suit, or even in his earlier red and yellow number, but in a homemade black suit that's pretty much just a black tracksuit with a black bandana tied over his eyes to hide his identity. It's simple, effective, and acts as a means of hyping up the eventual advent of Daredevil's classic suit. This suit highlights Matt's raw, unpolished beginnings. Ditching the specialized cowls for a simple bandana emphasizes his reliance on a pure radar rather than high-tech gear. It's a powerful visual reminder that he's just a man in the shadows, using nothing but his training and heightened senses to survive the night. This grounded look bridges the gap between the street brawler and superhero. By removing the armor and the iconic horns, we can see Matt's vulnerability. In this suit, every hit has weight, representing a trial by fire, where he must be faster and more brutal just to make it home alive. We can use the trailing ends of his bandana as a ribbon that follows the line of action. Don't just let them hang flat, draw them arching upwards or whipping behind the head to show the direction of Daredevil's momentum. If Matt is diving down, the tail should be pointing up towards the top of the panel, or like in this case, trailing after the backflip. When drawing this costume, you have to think gritty, street level, something a brawler would wear. Just a raw, edgy costume that's a nice juxtaposition from all the tailored and colourful superhero outfits that populate New York City. And it symbolises the types of street level crimes that Daredevil goes out to protect us from. To paint the world on fire, you have to stop thinking about solid objects and start treating the canvas like a fluid, impressionistic painting. Instead of drawing clean outlines, use messy, flickering strokes that suggest form, as if the character is being carved out of shifting embers. The goal isn't a perfect drawing, it's about capturing the vibration of sound, so let the colours bleed and blur together to create a drawing like it's constantly moving and burning in the dark. When we talk about Daredevil's world on fire, the first person that comes to mind is the deadly assassin Elektra. In October 1980, Frank Miller introduced us and Matt Murdock to a character that changed Daredevil forever. Though Elektra Nachos was a daughter of privilege and Matt grew up in the rough streets of Hell's Kitchen, both were ultimately defined by the shared tragedy of their father's murders. Despite their different upbringings, they both met while studying in Columbia University, but instead of upholding justice as Matt has chosen to, Elektra spirals towards the shadows where she channels her grief into a life of violence, tapping into her own lethal potential, eventually becoming one of the world's deadliest assassins. Their shared loss brings them together, but ultimately Matt and Elektra are doomed, driven in the opposite directions. In Miller's run, Elektra becomes a cautionary mirror as to what Matt may become. She's a force of love, trauma, and lethality, standing as one of Daredevil's most iconic and heartbreaking figures. In the wake of a battle with Silver Sable, Daredevil found himself in rags. With the opportunity to redesign his look, 90s Daredevil leaned into the more extreme tastes of the era. This is primarily a black suit with red details. The large metallic shoulder and knee pads gave the suit a functionally severe look. The shift towards armour was a departure from Matt Murdock's usual reliance on pure agility. The addition of heavy plating offered a layer of protection against the increasingly lethal villains of the 90s, allowing him to survive dangerous encounters that would have shredded his traditional outfit. This biomolecular suit, a suit designed with advanced synthetic fibers that could absorb and dissipate the kinetic energy of bullets and blades, wasn't just a cosmetic change. Matt took the alias Jack Batlin to distance himself from the vulnerability of his past life. The sharp metallic edges and muted colours reflected a colder, more clinical approach to justice. It's a definitive symbol of a period when Daredevil traded his swashbuckling charm for a more hardened, aggressive persona.
3 suits in and we're finally drawing the iconic logo. It looks complex, but it's straightforward if you break it down into 2 steps. First, don't view it as one shape. This is all about typography, which is the art of drawing letters. We need to vary the thickness by keeping the vertical lines thin, but making the curved sides thicker. These serifs, the decorative flourishes, are 2 horns on the D. Once you've mastered the first letter, we can just repeat, having one overlap the other, just like this. The sharp edges and repetitive plates of the armour give Daredevil a real edgy design, changing his silhouette from this to this. Here are a couple of quick tips for drawing armour. When you take a real close look at a mechanical edge, it often has a transitional edge between the 2 faces of an object. A chamfer slice is a corner that is cut off at a 45-degree angle. These edges help catch light and shadow. I add them to some of my edges with a very thin line right up against the edge like this. We can then weather the armour too, not too much mind you, with these small chips, scratches and dents. The 90s were a real fun time for comic book artists. It was a time for tons of pouches, chrome finishes and giant shoulder pads as everything moved towards the extreme for a time. In other words, a whole lot of fun to draw. This style of radar sense is all about topographical contouring. Instead of drawing anatomy and clothing details, you're drawing the volume of objects through a series of parallel vibrating lines. To draw it, you really have to think of objects in the round, not as flat drawings on paper, but as 3-dimensional shapes in a world. Then we use thicker lines to outline objects. There we go. And just like with our earlier radar sense, we're gonna invert the image, except this time, our line art will be a bright pink to really pop it off the background.
Let's see who Daredevil's fighting here. The villain who doesn't miss, the lethal Bullseye. A psychotic assassin with a flawless aim, Bullseye can turn absolutely anything from a paperclip, a playing card, a baseball, and even a tooth into a lethal weapon. And while he's one of the most skilled assassins in all of the Marvel Universe, it's his obsessive nature that makes him truly unforgettable. In Frank Miller's defining run, he paints Bullseye as a dark reflection of Daredevil. Where Matt devotes his life and energy to saving lives, Bullseye lives to end them. Evenly matched in battle, their clashes become ever more powerful, pathological and brutal, and when Bullseye successfully targets Elektra, it all but breaks the man without fear. Bullseye is more than just a villain. He's a reminder to Matt that he can never let his guard down, not even for a second, because when he does, Bullseye could be there in the darkness, waiting to take everything from him with a flick of his wrists. Something we see explored in the Disney Plus series Daredevil Born Again. Following him publicly revealing his identity as the man behind the mask, Matt left Hell's Kitchen and New York altogether for the sunnier climes of San Francisco. Possessed of a sly wit, Matt played up on the chatter that followed him, dressing in a bright red three-piece suit and a black shirt, complete with red leather gloves. This strong and vibrant fashion choice served as a calculated psychological tactic. By trading his traditional costume for high-end tailoring, Murdock used the flamboyant red suit to mock the concept of a secret identity. The outfit projected untouchable confidence, signaling that he no longer needed to hide in the shadows. It was a visual manifestation of his fearless nature, daring the public to challenge the man who is now legally and physically one and the same as the Vigilante. This attire defined an era where Matt Murdock stopped running from his reputation and instead invited the world to watch him embrace it.
When you're drawing a tailored suit in motion, you have to remember it's not spandex. It has weight and its own stiff logic that fights back against the body. Instead of just hugging the muscles, the fabric creates specific folds based on how it's being pulled. Next, you want to master the Z and pipe folds because the suit material is thicker than a standard t-shirt. It bunches up in heavy, distinct shapes. We can use the folds of the material to reinforce the line of action. It's a free way to add in more lines that emphasize his movement. A tailored suit jacket has a structure. Just try dancing at a wedding in one and you'll know exactly what I mean. Is it practical for a superhero? Probably not. But in my opinion, is it the most stylish fit in Marvel history? Absolutely. No notes, Matt. Well done. To really sell the Paulo Rivera style for this radar sense, you have to treat the environment like a soundboard where the louder the noise, the clearer the shape. Start by mapping out your birds, but instead of feathers, use the word flap repeatedly. For the police cars, you can use a loud, elongated WREE that follows the shape of the sirens. The cars are screeching to a halt, so let's wrap those letters around the hood and the body to give the vehicle its 3D volume. Then take every piece of shattered glass and draw them as individual crashes. Lastly, our antagonist has just been hit by a strong blow from Daredevil, so let's have a ka-thunk reverb across the whole figure. Wherever this guy goes, the sound effects of bang, boom, and kablam tend to follow him. The Punisher.
The original anti-hero of the Marvel Universe, Frank Castle, better known as the Punisher, first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 129 in 1974. Created by writer Jerry Conway and artists John Romita Sr. and Ross Andrew, Castle quickly became a fan favourite for one reason: he goes where heroes won't. A former Marine turned vigilante, Frank Castle's mission began after witnessing a mob hit. When the criminals discover he may testify, they target him but instead murder his family. From that moment on, Frank begins his battle of punishment in a method that is in direct conflict to Matt Murdock. Over the years, Castle has crossed paths with everyone from street-level heroes to ninja clans, crime lords, and even death itself. But one of his most defining relationships is with Daredevil. The classic image of Daredevil all in red came about as early as 1964's Daredevil issue 7. Gone was the yellow suit with the red vest and a large D on its chest. Instead, he opted for a more subtle DD design on red. This suit is not without its practicalities too, featuring the holster on his right thigh, which makes his billy club accessible whenever he needs them. The shift to an all-red palette served a significant storytelling reason. While the original yellow and black suit played homage to his father's boxing robes, the crimson transformation leaned into the demonic iconography of his name. This bolder monochromatic look
created a more intimidating look against the New York skyline as he became the devil of Hell's Kitchen. The suit's design also has evolved to reflect Murdock's physical vulnerability as a human fighting alongside superpowered beings. Later iterations of the red costume have reimagined the suit as a form of lightweight tactical armour. By incorporating impact-resistant materials like Kevlar or carbon fibre weave, the costume provides essential protection against knives and small arms fire without sacrificing the acrobatic agility required for his unique radar-sense guided fighting style.
To draw a centerpiece like this, I really wanted to lean into a classic heroic composition that felt both powerful and centered. I started with a strong symmetrical power stance right in the middle of the page to establish Daredevil as the anchor of the whole piece. While having him face forward with his billy clubs out to the side, it creates a sense of balance that holds all the chaotic action and scenes around him together. Since the classic suit is basically a second skin, I had to really emphasize the muscle groups, focusing on that V taper of the torso and using sharp, clean lines for the abs to make him look in peak physical condition, ready for a fight. I used the wrist wraps on his forearms to add in some much needed texture, drawing them as curved, overlapping lines to define the cylindrical volume of his arms while adding that bit of street brawler grit. For all these iconic details, the devil's in them after all, I made sure the horns on the cowl are sharp and prominent. And then I'm going to place the Daredevil logo clearly on the chest to catch the eye immediately. I'm going to keep the eyes blank as if the radar sense is being activated. Going back to our initial thumbnail, it was always the place to use the other versions of Daredevil and his villains as a montage background to frame the central figure, creating a narrative flow where your eyes start at the center and then spiral out to see the history of his suits and the enemies that he's faced. We're reaching the end of our drawing, so to test the new radar sense, we're going to need the biggest target in New York, Wilson Fisk.
A criminal mastermind, a political genius, and a broken child, Wilson Fisk has proved to be all of these things. But for Daredevil, the kingpin of crime will remain his greatest nemesis. More than a criminal syndicate boss, he's a mastermind, a man who has built an empire on fear, precision, and the belief that power is taken by the mighty, not granted by the people. In many of Daredevil's era-defining takes, Fisk is revealed as the ultimate manipulator, pulling the strings of New York's criminal underworld to ensure Matt is exactly where he wants him. Originally introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 50 in 1967, Fisk has gone on to reign not only as a crime lord, but also as the mayor of New York City, battling Daredevil on the street and Matt Murdock in the courts. Fisk is the ultimate foil to Matt's belief in justice, a mastermind who destroys anyone in his path. His massive, powerful physique makes him practically unstoppable in a physical fight, but it's his relentless, calculating mind that makes him truly terrible.
I've thought long about this, about how Matt senses things and how I want to replicate that in a style that updates what we've seen before. I want to figure out what it looks like if we have radar waves emanating out from Matt here interacting with a figure. So what does that look like? To do this, I'll use some 3D software and a physics-based node set up so that I can render lines based on this very distance from a surface. With these controls, I can shorten the distance between the waves and highlight the figure in more detail, and I can raise or lower their intensity until I find the exact right amount for how I want it to look. I can use this then as a guide for my drawings to help figure out just how to draw buildings, figures, and a stern, powerful face just like this. And here it is, the man without fear in all of his forms, from the raw street-level brawler suit all the way through to the tactical kinetic armor of his modern suit. I really wanted this central figure to feel like the pillar of it, while all of these different iterations of the suits, histories, and villains surrounded Matt in all of his forms, Here's how it looks then with our montage of radar senses around our hero.
And for one final step, most Marvel comics are created by a team of artists. I'll usually draw a piece and ink it so it looks just like this black and white image. And then just like magic, it's taken over by one of our incredible colorists. Here we have the amazing Rochelle Rosenberg, and these are the colors that she has done for this piece. And this then gives us a great look at how all of Daredevil's villains are seen by us, and then exactly how it would be seen with his own radar sense in his different iterations throughout the years. Thanks for following along into this deep dive of the radar sense and this design of a Marvel legend.